Minnesota Governor Tim Walz made his first appearance as the VEEP pick on Fox News Sunday and tried to correct what he says are misrepresentations of his record. Let's watch.
I don't think people care whether I used IUI or IVF when we talk about this. What they understand is Donald Trump would resist those things. Look, I speak passionately. I had an entire career, decades before I was in public office. They know, and I'm very proud of my 24 years in service and my record. I have never disparaged someone else in this, but I know that's not what Donald Trump does.
Bream pressed Walz on Minnesota's abortion law, which has no limits on terminating pregnancy. Here's that exchange.
Look, the vice president and I have been clear. The restoration of Roe versus Wade is what we're asking for.
But that law goes far beyond Roe v. Wade.
To make her own choice. The law is very clear. It does not change that. That has been debunked on every occasion. But
wait,
look, this is a.
Let's agree. What you signed is there's not a single limit through 9 months of pregnancy. Roe had a trimester framework that did have limits through the pregnancy. The Minnesota law does not have that.
This puts the decision with the woman and her health care providers. The situation we have is when you don't have the ability of health care providers to provide that, that's where you end up with a situation like Amanda Zaworski in Texas, where they are afraid to do what's necessary. This doesn't change anything. It puts the decision back on to the woman, to the physicians, and we know that this is simply something to be brought up to be very clear. Donald Trump's asking for a nationwide abortion ban.
Wait, he
and
has
again,
said that
we don't see this as a winning campaign.
He has said repeatedly that he will not sign a national abortion ban. Are you calling that just, it's a flat-out lie?
Yes, of course.
Well, look, I give Tim Walz credit for doing adversarial media. Everyone should do more of that. He's done a small number of interviews, but it's good to see him getting out there. What do you make of his responses?
I actually thought this was great for him. He shined. This is where he does well. He's very good with one-on-one. I don't know. I still give him a B for the debate, but I wish that whoever prepared him for the debate really started to lean into what made him strongest. I mean, I know they were trying to make him the most likable guy, but he's naturally likable. Even when he's giving interviews and they're tough questions, he still comes across as likable, but he's still tough. So I think, everybody, as he said, he's been in public office for a long time, and people misspeak. Not everybody understands what an IUE is compared to an IVF. I know IVF very well, and even then it gets complicated. Did you know that egg freezing is also IVF? A lot of people don't. So, if you're talking to normal people on TV and you're really trying to educate them as quickly as possible, you misspeak all the time. I think all in all, it was a very tough interview. Shannon Bream is incredibly pro-life. I've had to be interviewed by her in the past, too. She knows her facts for her side very well, and I think he was prepared to respond.
Yeah, there's misspeaking like he did at the debate when he said he was friends with the school shooter or whatever, and then there's what I would say is like a history of serial exaggerations about what happened with the IVF situation, IUE, his military record, his drunk driving incident, all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah, that's my problem, is that he often minimizes this down to, well, I said IUI instead of IVF, or I got the date a little mixed up, but there is a pattern of exaggeration, if not outright lies. I mean, on the service record question, he repeatedly uses a rank that he did not earn and continues to use it to this day. During the introduction video on the DNC stage for his speech, they still referred to him as Command Sergeant.
The New York Times did correct him on that one.
Yeah,
and then were like, yeah, that's an exaggeration.
And the Tiananmen Square,
yes.
I mean, that's a very odd thing to misspeak about, trying to be deaf to get out of a DUI, in his campaign lying about the circumstances of the traffic stop, and then in addition on the service record continuously talking about not just carrying weapons in war, but also saying that he suffered PTSD from his service during a moment in Congress. I mean, this is
he was
a pattern.
Stationed abroad. It wasn't. He didn't go into fighting, of course. We know that, active fighting. But he was stationed abroad. And listen, I mean, it was post 9/11. There's a lot. I never deny anybody's PTSD because you have no idea what's internally happening. With that being said, guys, we're talking about Trump here. Like Tim Walz compared to Donald Trump. First off, he's not even running against Donald Trump directly. He's running against J.D. Vance, who, let's talk about flip-flopping and lying and being all over the place. The man said he had nothing to do with Project 2025, yet not only was he backed by the folks who wrote Project 2025, he wrote the introduction to Project 2025 I mean, Donald Trump has been everywhere on abortion.
Okay.
He literally
He wrote a foreword for Kevin Roberts' book. He did not write the intro for Project 2025.
He also claimed he didn't know Kevin Roberts. And then you have Donald Trump, who has flip-flopped on everything, especially abortion. So, the fact that the media is like playing both sides of this, okay, let's look at the mounting evidence of lies from the Trump-Vance campaign.
If flip-flopping is a crime, is Kamala Harris not the biggest offender of all? Like literally undoing or going back on every single ideological commitment she made when she ran in 2019?
2019 is a commitment, and yes, politicians flip-flop. But lying continuously, I mean, the entire campaign, Donald Trump campaign is built off of misinformation. The fact checks got so out of control that they didn't even want to fact check during the debate. They had that little hashtag.
Can you give us some examples so we can actually talk about it instead of just like throwing out misinformation and lies, and we can talk about specifics?
It is 2024. Are we still debating this? His abortion
Clearly.
stances have changed. I mean, we were on another.
I agree with you that his abortion stances have changed.
30 times
yes,
changed.
That's not misinformation. That's just he did change his mind about that. Again, Kamala Harris has changed her mind on things far more recently than that. With the Tim Walz stuff, it's exaggerations of his personal record. It's more than changing policies, which is something you expect from political figures.
They're also running that they have the moral high ground against Trump. Like that's precisely the problem. Is they say Trump is such a nasty liar. His character makes him unfit to be president. But then they're apparently doing the same exact thing that they're projecting onto him. So you don't have the moral high ground anymore if you're behaving in the same way that you accuse your opponent of.
Yeah. As the moderate and centrist on this group of people, I think they're all mentally, emotionally, psychologically unfit to serve in office. I apply that to Donald Trump, Kamala Harris, both running mates, and almost the entire Senate and all of the Congress. But
there's a big lie, though. The fact that he thinks he won the election. So we can't deny that. Do you think that Joe Biden won the election in 2020?
I think
yes.
he did, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so that's the big lie that I think we really.
That was I mean, I have criticized Donald Trump for that endlessly on the show and otherwise. He was wrong to do it. Even beyond it being wrong, he damaged his own chances of being president again. It didn't come to anything. It was not good.
And I also think that there were legitimate concerns about the voting processes in 2020. And what I typically say is that the language shouldn't have been stolen, it should have been rigged, because the fundamental issue was with the last minute rule changes ahead of the election, where they were allowing ballots in that would have never been allowed in any prior year.
Well, it's because it was a pandemic.
Right, I understand why they did it, but I don't think it was the right move. Like Pennsylvania should have never suspended matching signatures on mail-in ballots like they did in 2020. And because Trump has exaggerated some of what happened for perhaps his own benefit or his campaign's benefit.
Or for his detriment. Honestly.
Then that has made it harder to have a legitimate conversation that needs to be had about voter fraud and the rule changes that took place in 2020.
And I also can't now, again, I am not a supporter of Trump, and I will not be voting for Trump. I will certainly not be voting for the Democrats. But I can't find his denial of the election to be totally disqualifying, given that think of all the Democrats who have done the same thing, including Hillary Clinton, who said Donald Trump was an illegitimate president in 2016 due to what she said was the unfairness of Russian bots and hacks and all that.
And I just agree with her on that too. I mean, the biggest mistake.
That was horrible.
Russia intervened without a doubt. I definitely agree with that. Jill Stein voters, people voted for Jill Stein, but that didn't turn the election for her. What turned the election was, I don't know, having an office in Wisconsin like your husband, Bill Clinton, said you should have, but instead they said, old man, we don't listen to you. The greatest politician probably in our generation, don't listen to.
And I think an even more apt comparison than Hillary Clinton is if you go to the Bush-Gore election, right? I mean, in 2000, you had half a dozen Democrats actually invoke the same piece of legislation that Trump tried to get Pence to invoke during the January 6th
That election was actually invalid.
But
the problem with that election is it was invalid.
Well, George W. Bush had called in favors, his brother. I mean, there's.
But now are you doing election denial now?
No, but it was 2000. I think pretty much the entire country agreed on that.
But the point is that there was a legislative process for challenging electors that was being used on January 6th, and everyone acts like this was so unprecedented for Trump to think that he might have had a claim to send the votes back to the states for an audit.
But nobody wanted to do so. Whereas with George W. There's a difference.
Yeah.
If the Democrats wanted to do so,
we don't put whether the
fine,
election was legitimate enough to a popular opinion kind of decision.
Right, exactly. Exactly.
All right, more rising to come. Stay tuned.